morning, or depending on when you're watching this, good afternoon, good evening, or good night. My name's Ross, and as always told, out of Voice of Radio. So today, it is time to continue our look at the complete history of the Pokemon trading card game, and we have reached as far as Majestic Dawn, a very good set that brought us, I'll be honest with you, right, it came out in May and it basically ruled the World Championships a couple months later. It was weird, but good. Now, it was released in English on the 21st of May 2008. It wasn't really released in Japan. Now, we talked about this a little bit last week, but essentially Japan went, you know what, we're going to have a 6-month gap between sets because we want to release our Diamond and Pearl 5 set to coincide with the movie Giratina and the Sky's Bouquet Shaman. Okay. But outside of Japan, they didn't want a 6-month gap between sets. So they basically took Japan's Diamond and Pearl 5 and they split it between the previous set and this one, and then added in a few extra little bits, like, for instance, the Japanese 2008 entry packs and some Japanese promo cards, and we ended up with this. Basically, and I tell you what, very, very good thing indeed. Now, in terms of the set as a whole, there really wasn't much going on in terms of facts other than the delay. The delay is really about the only story that came around because of it. I can tell you that both Glaceon and Leafeon made their debuts in Majestic Dawn. The new Eeveelutions of Eevee came around, which was quite nice. I can tell you that the pre-release promo card was Mothim. I have Mothim really to add about that. It was just Mothim. And the most expensive card are a couple of level X's. Garchomp level X. You will nowadays pay about $140 for that card. But it was a very playable, good card, and Garchomp is a very, well, popular Pokemon, so that makes sense. And Porygon-Z level X, you'll generally pay about $100. Although that card, honestly, quite a lot less popular in terms of playability, so there we go. Nah, maybe that's unfair. Porygon-Z was a pretty gosh darn good card as well. We'll get there in a minute. Now, in terms of the level X's, we obviously saw Garchomp and Porygon-Z, as we have just mentioned. Both of them are going to come up in a little bit. And we also saw Glaceon and Leafeon. They didn't just make their debuts, they also got level X cards as well, which is kind of lovely. Now, in terms of theme decks, we were back to just a normal set of 2 theme decks, and we got Polar Frost and Forest Force. And it probably shouldn't surprise you at this stage to learn that they were, in fact, Glaceon and Leafeon themed. It wasn't necessarily a Glaceon and Leafeon themed set, but certainly in terms of new Generation 4 Pokemon, these really were the interesting ones. These were the ones that really kind of announced their arrival, so to speak. Now, Polar Frost was the Glaceon theme deck, and you got yourself a Holo Rare Glaceon, which was very cool, of course, because it was exclusive to the deck. You could only find the Holo version here. And then you got yourself a Rare Jolteon and a Rare Empoleon, and as we're going to see, that Empoleon will come back around. As for Forest Force, that was a Grass Psychic deck, and you got yourself a Holo Leafeon, which again was exclusive. It was a non-holo in the set proper. And then you got yourself a Rare Espeon and a Rare Torterra. So kind of playing on the whole Eevee thing. And it is worth noting that held items were back in this particular set. We've seen them in a couple of sets so far, and they very much were back again in this one as well. Now, we did have Dialga and Palkia that came with orbs. Palkia came with a Lustrous Orb, whereby if the active Pokemon was weakness to water, you did 20 more damage. And then, of course, Dialga came with Adamant Orb, whereby if an active Pokemon had a weakness to metal, you'd do an extra 20 damage, which was kind of cool. We then did see some first partner Pokemon coming around with berries. Chimchar had Cherry Berry, whereby if you were paralyzed, you removed it at the end of each player's turn. Piplup had Petra Berry, where if it was poisoned, you removed it at the end of each player's turn. And Turtwig had Persim Berry, whereby if it's confused, you removed it at the end of each player's turn. I do appreciate the fact that these held items were themed throughout the sets. Now, in terms of the best cards, there were some really, really good cards in this set. Chief among them was probably Chatot. Chatot was amazing. Because for no energy, it was a free attack. We had free attacks then. You shuffled your hand into your deck, then drew a number of cards equal to the number of cards in your opponent's hand. So if they've got a 6-card hand, you get yourself a new 6-card hand. But you're talking basic Pokemon, 0 energy, free retreat. So in terms of an early game setup Pokemon, it was really hard to beat it. You didn't pay to attack, you didn't pay to retreat, and it was a really powerful effect in terms of getting extra cards. Shoutout made its way into a redonkulous amount of decks. As did Unknown Q. Now, Unknown Q had the Poké Power Quick, whereby once during your turn, if Unknown Q was on your bench, you could discard all cards attached to it, and then attach it to one of your Pokemon as a Pokemon tool, which reduced the retreat cost of the Pokemon it was attached to by 1. And this was phenomenal. It was a Pokemon, and bearing in mind, right, it is much easier to search Pokemon than it is to search, for instance, well, Pokemon tool cards. So it was easily searched out, and then it just gave you easier retreat. I mean, one of the big things it was used for, we haven't quite gotten to it yet, but Uxie did have a level X. And that level X was awesome, but remember the level X rule, you can only level X a Pokemon when it's in the active position. So what you would do is after a KO, you'd put Uxie in the active, you would level X it up, then you would attach Unknown Q, retreat it for free, and then you had Uxie on your bench using trade-off, which was a phenomenal Poké Power. There you look at the top 2 cards of your deck, one went in your hand, other went on the bottom of your deck. Wasn't the only use, it was one of many. It was a phenomenal card. And I know we're going slightly out of order here, but Cool Energy was also ridiculous. It was a colorless energy, but it kind of gave you an attack. It let you search your deck for 2 basic Pokemon, put them on your bench, and then end your turn. But in setup decks where you didn't have a turn 1 attack to use anyway, there was no real downside here. It was just a phenomenal card to help you get set up. It was absolutely ridiculous, and again, it saw play in so many decks. But there were some Pokemon that came around and made decks of their own. Empoleon became one of the very best decks in the game. Ironically, did replace the other Empoleon from Diamond and Pearl, which again was a phenomenal card, but really did just get replaced by this one pretty much immediately. And what we saw from this Empoleon was Dual Splash. 2 energy, and do 30 damage to 2 of your opponent's Pokemon. Really nice for getting energy on the board, start spreading it round, etc, etc. But you also had Surf Together for free energy, 50 damage, plus 10 more for each of your bench Pokemon. And then flip a coin, if tails it did 10 damage to each of your bench Pokemon. We didn't like that, but we did like doing 100 for free energy if you had a full bench. That's a pretty good attack as far as things go. And Empoleon just became a very, very good deck indeed. Don't forget, of course, at the time we had cards like Scramble Energy, which were really, really good in terms of allowing you to essentially pay the attack cost for 1 energy attachment if you were behind on prizes. But you would often be behind on prizes because you would spend the first couple turns just spreading damage around, using Dual Splash to do 30 here and 30 there and 30 here and 30 there, and either your opponent didn't take a KO, in which case you just keep spreading damage around, or they do take a KO, at which point they activate Scramble Energy. Kind of a pick your poison where neither of the options are actually any good. Scizor was another phenomenal card that ended up as one of the very best decks almost immediately. For 1 Metal Energy, you did 30 damage, but if the defending Pokemon had any special energy cards attached, you did 80. 80 for 1 energy on Stage 1 single prize Pokemon was just ridiculous. And either your opponent attached their special energy and then you took advantage of it, or they didn't attach their special energy and then they were much slower and they weren't playing at their capacity. Then free energy, 50 damage, 90 on a heads. Yeah. This was pretty gosh darn good, ladies and gentlemen. This was pretty gosh darn good. And one that did see a bunch of play with that particular card was actually Toxicroak. Toxicroak was another one of these really good Pokemon, and it was another one of these that attacked for a single energy. 20 damage plus poison, flip a coin, If heads, also paralysis. Now for free energy, you also did 60 damage, and let's not forget that at the time, Gardevoir was kinda big, and was weak to Psychic. And let's not forget that Gallade was also kinda big, in the same deck incidentally, and was also weak to Psychic. So you were essentially having a really good option against those Pokemon, and people did play more Psychic Pokemon back then just to have an answer to Gardevoir Gallade. And frankly, Toxicroak was a really good answer to them. Speaking of good answers to them, Bronzong. Bronzong was a good card. Bronzong had the Pokebody Cursed Alloy, which, between turns, put 1 damage counter on each of your opponent's Pokemon with any Poké Powers, and that's after yours, after theirs, etc., as long as it was active. For 0 energy, you put 1 damage counter on each of your opponent's Pokemon that already had damage on, which hopefully would be most of them because of the whole, Pokebody thing. And for free energy, you did 60 damage, and then during your opponent's next turn, damage done to it was reduced by 20. And essentially, you've got a really good Pokebody, a nice attack which was great if you couldn't find the energy you needed, or any energy at all, and an attack that worked as a nice counter for Gardevoir Gallade, and what you had was a Pokemon that found its way into an awful lot of decks because it did an awful lot of good things. Mewtwo, however, did 1. Mewtwo really was played for energy absorption. 0 energy, search your discard pile for up to 2 energy cards and attach them to Mewtwo. And the reason this Mewtwo was so good was Mewtwo level X that would come along in Legends Awakened. Because it prevented all effective attacks, including damage done to Mewtwo, by your opponent's basic Pokemon. And as we're going to see in later sets, basic Pokemon became huge. Also worth noting, it did also get a 1-hit KO on Machamp, which again, we haven't got to Machamp yet, but Machamp was kind of huge, ladies and gentlemen. Machamp was ridiculous. We'll get there in a couple sets time. But Machamp was an absolute beast, and this gave you a good answer to it. But as well as that, you also had just this Pokebody that made you immune to basic Pokemon, of which there were many. But free energy, 120, discard all energy attached to Mewtwo. So essentially it would go like this. You use Majestic or Mewtwo to get 2 energy on, attach a third, Gigaburn. Attack with Mewtwo to get energy on, next turn attach a third, Gigaburn. And okay, you'd only Gigaburn every other turn, but if you were completely locking your opponent's basic deck out of the game, it didn't matter, and if it was a one-off thing against something like a Machamp, you would again sometimes be alright, though timing would obviously be absolutely crucial. Now the Palkia in the set did see a little bit of play for the Palkia level X we talked about before. It wasn't a phenomenal card, if I'm honest with you. It's nothing too amazing about it. We do like the Lustrous Orb, and having a single energy attack that made your opponent switch with one of their bench was cool, although they would choose which one switched in. And that was kind of the reason you played it, just make your opponent switch. It was largely just a conduit to Palkia level X, and this wasn't the only one played. Some people played other Palkias, but it did see play, and it's worth mentioning. Speaking of which, Glaceon. Now, AC and Tunnen, who, if you've been following Pokemon content creation for a while, that name might sound a little bit familiar, actually took a top 8 finish at the World Championships using Glaceon level X. You see, Glaceon level X had the Pokebody Chilly Breath. Turned off Poké Powers. Completely turned off Poké Powers. Now, free energy, 70 damage, if heads 20 to each your opponent's bench was fun. But what was also fun was the Glaceon from the... Now, there were 2 Glaceon in the set proper, but one was significantly better. It had Snow Cloak. 30 damage, flip a coin, if heads, it's just invulnerable next turn. Prevent all effective attacks, including damage done to Glaceon during your opponent's next turn. And when you're turning off Poké Powers and you're invulnerable, it's going to take a lot for your opponent to get through you. To be fair, having an attack free energy 60 damage that went through anything that would otherwise be blocking you, also a very cool thing. And Glaceon's a fun one to look at because actually there was a lot of Eevee stuff in the set. There was an Eevee, shockingly, Single colourless energy, search your deck for as many Eevee as you like and put them onto your bench. So your first turn when you're allowed to attack, you just use this attack, and then you go and get your other 3 Eevee, assuming none of them are prized, of course, and you just whack them all onto your bench at once. That was pretty gosh darn cool. And then we just had a bunch of other Eevees that were either good for supporting or good for attacking. So Umbreon was a particular favourite of mine. I played this not with Eeveelutions in this set, but a little while later with other Umbreon, because each of your Pokemon that evolved from Eevee has no weakness and no retreat cost, which was pretty awesome. Espeon gave all of your Pokemon that evolved from Eevee an extra 20 HP, although it did not stack, that was very important. And then you had things like the Leafeon. 1 energy, 30 damage, stops them retreating, or 3 energy, 60 damage, and during your opponent's next turn, damage is reduced by 20. The Jolteon that for 1 energy did 20 damage and paralysis on a coin flip, or the 3 energy did 50, or 90 if you discarded 2 energy. The Vaporeon, 1 energy, 30 damage, remove 2 damage counters from all of your bench, or 3 energy, 60 damage, flip a coin until you get tails. For each heads, discard an energy attached to the defending Pokemon. And what we've essentially got here is just a bunch of different Pokemon that can hit different weaknesses. I mean, I haven't mentioned Espeon yet, but 3 energy, 60 damage, move an energy to one of your bench, bearing in mind that would be a good counter for the whole Gardevoir thing. And Umbreon, 3 energy, 50 damage plus confusion. And people would just play these Eeveelutions as a deck in and of themselves. I mean, according to the lovely folks over at PTCGRadio.com, great website you should all be checking out, Orion Craig took first place at Seniors US Nationals using this deck. It won US Nationals. In Seniors, but still, it won US Nationals. And let's be clear, it is not easy to win in Seniors. Some people think it is. I assure you it's not. Just look at the amount of seniors lately that have aged up into masters and then just kept winning. And finally, in terms of Pokemon, I do think it is worth mentioning just briefly Porygon-Z Level X. I told you it was very expensive. There must be a reason people actually wanted to play it. Now, Porygon-Z Level X was a very weird Pokemon indeed, because it is an extremely rare example of a Pokemon that had 2 Poké Powers abilities, call them what you will depending on what area you're in, and no damaging attacks. Now you see, Porygon-Z had the Poké Power Mode Crash. When you put Porygon-Z Level X to evolve a Porygon-Z, you discarded all of your opponent's special energy, and we've talked in the past several videos about how good special energy was at the moment. And the Poké Power Decode, once during your turn you may search your deck for any 2 cards and put them on top of your deck in any order. But bearing in mind we had the Porygon 2 from Great Encounters that let you discard a supporter card and use it as the Poké Power, which essentially gave you extra draw power, which was kind of awesome. Basically, it gave you extra consistency, and that was wonderful. And I hated on special energy, and that was fun. Now, in terms of trainer cards, there really wasn't much. There were a few reprinted things, but nothing too major. Dawn Stadium did feature Glaceon and Leafeon, again, fitting the theme of the set quite nicely. And whenever you attached an energy from your hand to one of your grass or water Pokemon, you removed 1 damage counter and all special conditions, which was a fun little stadium. And that really was pretty much it. I could mention Cool Energy here, but I did mention that earlier. Now, in terms of top decks, this is one of those sets that really did introduce a number of actual decks, where you can look at those decks and go, that deck came from Majestic Dawn. Empotech. Now, Empotech was actually used by Dylan Lefevre, my apologies for the pronunciation, to win the senior division of the 2008 World Championships, and it was just that Empoleon we mentioned earlier, using stuff like Scramble Energy to put your opponent in a really awkward situation as to what they actually wanted to do. But it did have some fun little tricks. It played that Dusknoir from Diamond and Pearl that would wreck your opponent's bench, which was kind of funny. If your opponent had 4 or more bench Pokemon, you could choose one to shuffle back in. which was nice. And it played Holon's Cast form, which just came around as, well, basically just an extra energy, which worked rather nicely. It played that Tauros we mentioned before that let you discard a Stadium in play, which was nice. It played Mew Star, which we mentioned previously in a previous video, which just lets you copy attacks. So you basically use Mew to copy Empoleon's attacks, or indeed any attacks you wanted. And then it would play stuff like Cessation Crystal, which would, you attach it to your Pokemon and it turns off Poke Powers and Poke Bodies. But you weren't relying on Poke Powers and Poke Bodies, so it really did work rather nicely indeed. And it was largely a deck where you spread damage around, wait to go behind on prizes, turn off Poke Powers, and have a jolly old time. Intimidation was the junior winning deck from the 2008 World Championships, won by Tristan Robinson, and it really was a Toxicroak Scizor deck. We mentioned both of these cards earlier, and what you essentially had was good single prize Pokemon for single energy attacks. You had Toxicroak as an answer to Gardevoir, you had Scizor as an answer to special energy, and you even had the paralysis and poison going on if you wanted with Toxicroak as well. And what you essentially had was just a bunch of really annoying stuff to just really hurt your opponent and stop them doing very much of anything that they would actually want to do. Like we mentioned a moment ago with the Empoleon deck, we did play Cessation Crystal to turn off Poke Powers. But we also played Crystal Beach here, which said that any energy that provides 2 or more now just provided 1 colorless energy. So not only did you have single energy, single prize attackers that were extremely efficient and had other tricks, but you essentially had ways of turning off Poke Powers and special energy. It really did do an awful lot of very good stuff. Now we do need to give a shout out to Garchomp at this point, because Garchomp really was a very, very nice deck here. Now, Sammy Sakum, according to PTCG Archive, did take second place at UK Nationals. I'm assuming he lost to his brother Yassine, because we did actually have a series of like 6 years or something where the Sakum brothers were the only people that could win UK Nationals. It was very strange. And it really was built around Garchomp Level X. Now, it did use the Garchomp we saw previously, the one that came around in Mysterious Treasures, and that was the one that had the Pokebody, whereby if an active Pokemon had weakness to any of the types of energy attached to Garchomp, you did 40 more damage. So essentially 110 for free energy was pretty good, and you would play a whole bunch of different basic energy to try and hit the maximum number of Pokemon for 110. You then had Garchomp Level X with Dragon Pulse. Once during your turn, when you put it from your hand onto your active Garchomp, you flipped 3 coins, and for each heads you put 1 damage counter on each of your opponent's bench Pokemon, which obviously added up fairly quickly into somewhat of hilarity. Then, of course, for 0 energy, you got to search your discard pile for a non-Level X Pokemon, put it onto your bench, and then search for free basic energy and attach them. So you could get your Garchomp out, but you would also then get free different basic energy onto them. So not only would you have all of the energy that you needed, you would also be able to have the free perfect basic energy to actually take out or do the extra damage to whoever you wanted. It was a frankly ridiculous thing, ladies and gentlemen, but it worked out really rather nicely indeed. And then there was the Eeveelutions deck, which won US Nationals in seniors, but we've kind of already talked about that one quite a bit. I think we've covered that one rather nicely, so I don't think we need to repeat ourselves here. And I should mention that the Level X this deck chose to play was actually the Leafeon Level X, the only Level X we've not actually talked about from this set yet. It had the Poke Power Energy Forcing. Once during your turn, you could attach an energy from your hand to one of your Pokemon. Didn't have to be active, which was kind of ridiculous. And bearing in mind, you got awkward energy costs here for, well, you got a lot of single energy attacks, but you got a lot of awkward ones as well, so that was kind of fun. And then for 2 energy, you did 30 damage plus 10 more for each energy attached to all of your Pokemon. And hopefully you've got lots of energy out, and that would do a huge amount of damage. Majestic Dawn was a good set, a really good set. It introduced multiple staple cards that would be around in the majority of decks for pretty much the whole time they were legal, as well as introducing multiple really, really strong archetypes, and as far as I'm concerned, that is a mark of a pretty gosh darn good set. But I'd like to know what you think, and I'd like to know your memories of this set, and I'd like to know, frankly, whatever you'd like to tell me, so let me know in the comment section. Go nuts! Be nice! And then make sure you like this video, subscribe to this channel, follow me on Twitter at TheWasi, and Twitch for some live action at twitch.tv/PTCGRadio. If you want to support the channel, get some bonus podcasts and all that good stuff, head on over to patreon.com/PTCGRadio, where you can do exactly that. But by far the most important thing, as always, look after yourselves till next time, would ya? Thank you very much for watching. My name's Ross, and you've been watching PTCG Radio.